This is all a bit scary. Anyway, I've got a story to tell you, and it's a story about the place that I live in, Todmorden. You've just heard about it. It looks like this. It's a perfectly normal northern town. It's got a failing market. It's got schools that have got problems. It's got unemployment. It's got health problems, whatever else it might be. Used to look like that, and now it looks more like this. So it's got fruit and herbs and veg growing all over the place, very public places. We call them propaganda gardens. It's got them at the railway station, in front of the college. It's got them anywhere we can stick them. It's got food for sharing in places at the end of streets. And we're doing it not because we're bored. We're doing it not because we think that by doing 30-odd propaganda gardens in the middle of town, we're going to feed 15,000 people. We're doing it because we're sick and tired of waiting for somebody to grasp the nettle of what the heck are we going to do about our kids' future. We're doing it because we're really sick and fed up of the stuff that was talked about at the Rio West Summit 20-odd years ago when, everybody said, we've got to change our ways, we've got to do something about the resources, we've got to tackle poverty, we've got to take health issues seriously. The nations of the world will unite about it. Well, 20-odd years later, I'm still waiting for that. I'm still waiting for that sense of urgency about our kids' future, which means more to me than anything in the entire world, so blow it. If nobody else is going to do it, why don't we start to do it ourselves? And this all kind of kicked off 7 years ago when I went to listen to Tim Lang, who's a great guy, fantastic, talking about climate change and the use of the planet's resources and God knows what else, and it was so depressing that I got on a train back to Manchester, and I was either going to hit the gin with a wet towel or I was going to do something else, and in 2.5 hours, I just made up IncredibleEdible. I didn't consult about it, I didn't write a report, I didn't do a strategy document, I didn't do a policy. I'm not interested in all that type of stuff, because if every single person in this room and every single person in this government and every government that's been since 1922, whatever, doesn't know enough that there's something wrong with the system, there's something wrong, we're kind of failing our kids if they don't know that it's a bad job. Because most of the people on the streets in Todmorden, they know it. Most of the people that I'm meeting, they absolutely know it in their bones that we've got to change. So what are we going to do? Good old Virgin Trains. It took them 2.5 hours. I got a serviette out and I drew up the IncredibleEdible model. And it's kind of like, I could have drawn anything, but you just got to kind of like go for it, haven't you? So I thought, right, we'll have 3. We'll pretend that the place that I live, because it's all about the place that you live, things that you can get your hands on that you can actually do something about. Let's pretend it's a jigsaw puzzle, and let's actually see if we can find some simple, understandable, unifying language that we all get that can inspire us to start to think about the way that we live our lives, to start to think about the spaces around our lives, start to think about how we relate to our next-door neighbours, and start to think about what we ourselves can do, as the previous speaker said, to make a difference in this world. And if we can actually find this unifying language, if we can find something that sparks us off to do something, meaningful in our lives, is it possible that we could then replicate that and spread that around the place and get more people interested? Now, I kind of live in a place that is 9 miles away from a town where a long time ago some fellas sat round when they got no money whatsoever. It was fellas, I'm sorry to say that, but it happened to be so. And they said, Fred, why don't you buy a sack of flour and then I'll split it with you and you can do... And that started the cooperative movement, and there was a moment in history when that happened, and I just thought, well, damn it, if it happened then, it can happen again now. So, what if we actually found a way of inspiring everybody to be part of a solution, not a problem? Stopping being a victim, stopping waiting for somebody else to give us permission, starting to use the gifts that we've got to build a kinder world for our children. Is it possible? Yes, it's possible. And what's the language? It's food. It's really straightforward. Everybody gets it. We've got a kind of motto. It's not a motto, it's kind of like a phrase that we use to say, be part of a club. If you eat, you're in. You don't have to pay any membership fee, you don't have to do anything clever, you don't have to be a graduate in anything, you just have to eat. So, that's a pretty inclusive movement as far as I'm concerned. Let's imagine, therefore, that we put local food that we've grown ourselves at the heart of our lives, the place that we live in, at the heart of our community, along our streets, in our neighbourhoods, in our front gardens, in front of our schools, at our railway station. Would having an edible landscape that we're walking through day in and day out, would it change the way we think about ourselves? Would it change the way we think about seasons? Would it change the way we think about our environment? I don't know. It's an experiment with a whole host of volunteers. Nobody gets paid for doing anything like this, but it kind of felt like it would be an interesting thing to do. And then if we've got edible landscapes, What about learning how to do more of them? What about spreading? What about sharing those lost arts of how to skin a rabbit or graft a tree or plant a carrot or whatever it is? And what about actually being brave enough to get into that educational system that doesn't seem to think we need farmers of the future, doesn't seem to think we need to skill our people up when we need more and more food grown from our urban areas? You know, if Jonathan Porritt's anything like right, and we've got to do 40% of our food growing in our urban areas, where are the people? Where are we investing? Who are we invested in? What on earth are we doing in our educational system? And then, if we've got edible landscapes and we're teaching people about growing and cooking and all the rest of it, is it not a reasonable proposition that we would want to spend more of the pound in our pocket on those people that are like-minded, local farmers, local producers? And could we then not start to create sticky money in a way that wasn't about a government policy, not about spending lots of money, not about having loads of advisors, but just living our lives in a different way? Well, let's see. Community. This is a holiday short time. Lots of pictures, not a lot of words. So, propaganda gardens. Well, where are you going to start? Well, right in the middle of town. So here we've got something, top right. It was a dog toilet. It was a verge. It was a place that nobody loved. It was a place you threw fag packets down and tin cans and God knows what else. So, we put on our rubber gloves or whatever it was 6 years ago, and we went in there and we cleared it out. And we planted cherry trees and herbs. We planted chard, you name it. And you know we didn't ask permission, of course. Why would you ask permission to do something wonderful in your town that's your gift? And the other thing is, you know, I believe in kindness. If you went to a local government person and said, would you mind if do you know what they said? They said no. Well, don't make them feel miserable. Don't ask them in the first place. Just do it. And the really interesting thing about this is when we'd done it, a year and a half later, the council started mowing that area and put a bench in there, and we never asked them to do that. And then there's another propaganda garden in the health centre. Now, we did go because they thought we might have noticed us. Now, this is slightly barking. We do brand new 6, 7, 8, whatever it is, local health centres in the middle of our towns, and we surround them with inedible prickly plants. What's the point of that? We then run a multi-million-pound Eat 5 a Day campaign. Well, let me see. Why don't we just plant edible landscapes around our health centre so that the people that are going to that health centre, mums, dads, kids or whatever, can actually eat the stuff, understand where raspberries, strawberries and God knows what come from, and start to think, oh, this is a jolly good idea, I like this. So, we went to this health centre, we whipped up all the prickly plants, we stuck in the apple trees that we'd saved up for, we took over a car park at the back, we planted it up as an apothecary garden so people could chill out there and pick mint and make tea or do whatever. And suddenly it became obvious to the doctors that this was a more sensible use of space than popping pills all the time, because actually people were getting healthier by just picking and making raspberry jam. And then there was the good old job centre. Now, this was hilarious. So, the job centre... yeah, I mean, you just got to have a sense of humour, haven't you? You've lost your job. You know, it's going down the pan. You're really depressed, and you've got to walk across that top right-hand corner tarmac every single blooming week. So, they said to us, would you mind? We quite like this. Would you like to do... We said, certainly, we'll do a propaganda garden there. So, in the middle of winter, when it was snowing, we went there with our wood, which we had to take down several streets because there was nowhere to park at the front, and we built them the raised beds, and we put in there, and the whole point of putting edibles there was so, you know, if you've got time on your hands, maybe people would think I could do this in my own front garden, back garden, or maybe I could skill up, or maybe, whatever. It seemed to us a damn good idea to do it. There was only one problem. We needed electricity, so we went to the local job centre and we said, excuse me, bearing in mind that it didn't cost them a penny for us to do this, it was snowing, it was in the middle of winter, and we're just doing it. Can we plug our drill into your electrics? Sorry, you're not pad tested, and that was the end of that. So, bit of a two-way street to be maintained, but we'll get there in the end. And then, of course, because you've got to have a sense of humour, one of the places that we thought, and we did ask permission for this, because, you know, even we aren't that mad. So we said to the police station, you've got a lovely little space in front, could we do some raised beds? We won a competition with B&Q because, you know, we've got no core funding, we've got no core staff, we just have to make it up as we go along. And we built these, we could have put edible flowers in there, but it didn't seem quite right with the boys in blue. So we put great big whacking sweet corn. And the really interesting stuff about that is we get police from all over the north of England coming to have a look at how we've actually done it, because the police in Todd tell everybody else that community relations have never been better and that vandalism in the town is down. People might still vandalise petunias and daffodils. They do not vandalise food. Isn't it interesting? And then you've got learning. So we've got these propaganda gardens all over the place, and people are walking through edible landscapes, and it's making them think about things. And they say, oh, how do I actually do that? So we teach young people not to poke people's eye out with forks, and this is Sid. And so far, he's not blinded anybody, so that's a good move. We work where we can in schools with parents' groups after, just to get kids really interested in wiggly worms and beasties and growing their own stuff, all the stuff that everybody recognises by, it's really important that kids should learn to be able to feed themselves and be more self-reliant. And we've worked with kids that we're told you'll never get anywhere, you've never got any qualifications, so they've come out with the first qualification in their life and they feel great about themselves. And my God, what a fantastic thing to be able to share with somebody, and how important it's going to be in the future that these kids really do believe in themselves. But it's not just about the schools. Because if you actually teach kids in the schools, but you don't share it with the rest of the community, so when they go out to the school gate, they're still eating pot noodles, you've kind of wasted your time. So what we also do is take over with communities around schools or wherever it might be, working with families, and we take over spaces like this, which are disused tennis courts. And we work in the poorest areas, and we build raised beds, and we give them to people in the local estate, and they take them over. And this lady, who didn't know anybody whatsoever, but is obviously a magnificent bean grower, suddenly becomes a heroine in her community. And people start to go and knock on her door, and how did you do that? And so community starts to work. And we rack up on a Sunday morning in a pub or at a leisure centre or wherever it is with our tent, and we show people how to turn that food, that stuff that's been grown, into good food. And there's no point in getting them to come to you, because you need to go to them and get them out of bed and tell them it's exciting, and sometimes it's quite challenging. You could be the only person up on the estate. Nevertheless, sometimes then we have to stick a false chicken on somebody's head to make them actually get up and see what we're doing. Or you might actually want to show people how they can create orchards and fabulous, blossoms, and think about pollination or whatever. So you go out there and you knock on people's doors and you show them how to graft a tree so they can produce orchards at half the cost. Because, this is a movement for everybody. This isn't a movement for people who can afford to buy themselves out of problem. The Guardian, the Times, the Telegraph reader, they'll sort themselves out. This is a movement for people who do not know where to start to build a better future for their kids. This is a movement irrespective of class and culture and age and ability. You have got a role in the future of your children, and you are the solution. You are not the problem. So then we've got the business. We've got the edible landscapes, we've got the reskilling. What about sticky money? What about jobs for our local kids? What about thinking about apprenticeships? What could we, as a load of volunteers, just ordinary people, what could we do about the economy? We haven't got a cheque to write for anybody, so we bought some blackboards, and we gave them to our local market, because we're a market town, It kind of says it on the tin, doesn't it? And the market's failing. So we gave them to local people who were selling local food, and we put IncredibleEdible on the top. They started to chalk up what they were selling. More and more people got interested. Over the years, new stalls came to us and said, can we have some? We want to start selling local food. Those green shoots of opportunity presented themselves in kind of a really positive attitude. So now we've got farmers diversifying into making cheese. We've got more breweries. We've got more bread producers. We've got more people doing kind of like bits here and there, but nevertheless gaining confidence, earning an income, starting to see that local food actually could be the future for them. But the other thing we actually did for the economy was invent a new form of tourism called vegetable tourism. And this is really interesting. People come from all over the world, with their cameras or without their cameras, very often in the middle of winter when there's nothing growing whatsoever. We are in the north of England, and poke around in the beds. And are they coming there because we know how to grow cabbages better than everybody else? No. They're coming because they want a piece of a future that they can get involved in. That's the reason they're coming. We're huge in China and Korea. We've no idea what they're saying about us because we can't read it. But it looks jolly good on the page. So what could we actually do for our veg tourists? Well, with some local designers, actually, some local supporters, we said, well, why don't we just create a route that was joining up all our propaganda pots? So they did that. They start at the railway station, they move along through the town, but more than that, they move through the market, they move past the cafes, they move past the little shops, so that when they come to our town, they don't just whip into the supermarket, buy the bag of New Zealand apples and whip out again. They actually start to put money into local small businesses, and that is what we need, something that generates local sticky money. We've got a canal. We made it incredible edible. Again, why would you ask anybody's permission? It's a dog toilet, it's horrible, so we just cleared it all up. We've planted apple trees and plum trees and fennel and all manner of things. And now families walk along it on a regular basis, talk to their kids about it, taste the stuff that's growing. Really, it makes them smile, and that's what we're all about. And then we've got other businesses that are on the route. They said, I want to be a bit of this, let me do it. So they build a raised bed and they do whatever. And then right in the middle of town, right next to our market, where the council, bless their little cotton socks, have put a huge hoarding round a brownfield site. We said, you know, could you possibly get rid of that? That's right in the middle of our town. We're trying to support our local market. It looks absolutely horrible. So we persuaded them to take it down, provided we did the landscaping and we did... So we made some money, we got some money and we planted up these various planters and we took over the right-hand corner of the site and we've planted it up with espaliers of apple trees and rhubarb. We're big on rhubarb in Todmorden and all sorts of other things. And we created a little sign that's like a street sign. It's not a proper street sign. It says Pollination Street. And right next to Pollination Street is a beehive, and it's not a proper beehive, but that doesn't matter. It gets people talking and they give it a kick and they have a look in and see what's happening. And the interesting thing when we did that was the council took over that other bit of land, they mowed away, they planted some wildflowers and they put some picnic benches so that people could go into the market, buy some food, pick some herbs, sit down and enjoy themselves. If we'd asked them to do that, they'd have never done it. Because the people had the will to do something different, they responded to it. People want to do positive things all the time. They just don't always know how to do it. And as a result of that, we now have a community that before couldn't have given a toss about it, thinking about a neighbourhood plan, thinking about something that they want in their own community. Where would they have the growing spaces? How much land do they want around the houses in the future so they can grow in it? Where do they want the processing units? They are taking an active part in designing their own future. And all we've done in this experiment of volunteers is plant veg. And we've got social enterprises as well. We won some lottery money. It was extremely scary, and we've built this thing in partnership with the high school so that the kids at the high school can learn aquaponics, you know, the technology, the science behind growing fish sustainably in an urban setting, hydroponics, and also using robotics with a wonderful guy, and that's another thing called a Sprigawatt, teaching kids about the importance of a living soil. So we've got people working there, and we've got apprentices there, and we just made it up in the beginning. And we've got another social enterprise. It's called an Incredible Farm. It's kind of like a market garden training centre. We ended up being given by a local market gardener this bit of land. It was horrible. It was muddy. He didn't want it. So we raised some money. We put a fence around it. We begged, borrow and stole. And we created somewhere where we've got apprentices, where kids can imagine a future around growing and the community can share it as well. You know, we just decided we had to demonstrate that you can do things without a load of money, without a load of permission. And, you know, it just makes you feel so much better to be able to see kids come in here, asking for jobs, getting some jobs and learning some new trades. And is it spreadable? This idea that a community itself can pick itself up, can start to believe in itself, can build resilience and a feeling of kindness and contentedness. And is it possible it's spreadable? Yeah, of course it is. All over the country, 80-odd communities starting to say, I had not the foggiest idea how to deal with some of these big issues, but now I know. I'm going to start growing, one plot at a time. I'm going to start learning. I'm going to start hammering on at my school. I'm going to support local businesses. And with those three things happening together, I'm going to build a stronger kind of future. And can it go anywhere else? Yes, France has gone ballistic. I have absolutely not the foggiest idea why that's the case, but it has. Ordinary people not asking permission, starting to build something. And throughout this entire process, which has been the most wonderful thing I've ever done in my entire life, to see people just grow organically in their own self-belief and their own ability to change the future. I've learned one thing, and it's the most important thing I've ever learned. You have to believe in the power of small actions. They can absolutely change your future and our history. Thank you.